Welcome to Boris Effects Live. Sponsored by Dell, NVIDIA, and Intel.
Hello everyone and welcome back to Boris Effects Live. I'm Ben Brownlee and I'll be ushering you through today's stream. Now we've got a great guest joining us today, the incredibly talented portrait photographer and creative educator, Jonny Edward. He's going to be talking to us about his work and exploring some shots live in optics in a little bit. Now, if you don't know who Jonny is, well, strap in because you are in for a treat. His work is absolutely fantastic. Now, we're also going to be joined by Optics Product Manager and friend of the show, Renee Robin, who is back to fill in for all of my hosting inadequacies. And obviously, we'll talk a little bit about the home straight on our October Sinister Shots competition. Now, of course, you should be watching live because it means you get to ask and get answers to your questions. So if you aren't, then remember to subscribe to get notifications about all our upcoming streams. And if you are, here's how you can get involved. So obviously next to the window that you are currently watching me in is a little chat window. So tippity tap all of your questions in there, please, as quickly as you can, or as soon as your brain thinks of them. Now, if you're watching on Boris Effects Live, you'll also have a chat window, plus the ability to come in and join our competition today. We're giving away some big prizes, and those are available exclusively at boriseffectslive.com. We're going to be giving away 3 Optics 1-year subscriptions, each with a value of $99. And to one lucky winner at the end of the show, we are going to be giving away a Boris Effects Suite, a 1-year subscription worth $1,295. So now is the time to go to Boris Effects Live, scroll down to the bottom of the page, fill in the details, and join us there. Of course, full terms and conditions do apply. I just want to say thank you, of course, to all of our sponsors, NVIDIA, Dell, and Intel, for helping us make this stream happen. We are very, very happy to be talking about Dell technologies with the ability to conquer the complexity of AI with Dell Precision. See, that's a pun, because their product line is called Dell Precision, and it's the precision of Dell, which is very, very good. So thank you very much to Dell and, of course, NVIDIA. I also want to say, if you aren't doing that already, you should follow us on all of our socials. You're already on YouTube, so why not hit the subscribe button? Of course, we're on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter X, of course, so follow us wherever good social medias are found. And of course, if you are of a certain age, you want to join us on Discord. That's where we have a lot of very, very lively discussions going on. So if you want to be one of our first 10,000 members in Discord, just go scan on that QR code. Or if you have fingers, you can go to www.boriseffectsdiscord.com. Don't skimp out on the www. Don't ask me why. That's just the way it is. Alrighty. Well, let's get in and start to bring in our guests now. That's enough of my nonsense here. Our first guest is one actually we've spoken to several times before. A friend of the show, Renee Robin. Renee, hello, welcome back to Boris Effects Live.
Hello. It's good to be back. Good to be in the comment section answering people's questions. So very good.
I hope you don't just stay in the comment section. Also be here as well.
I am here. I am here for this show because this is going to be a good one. I'm very excited about this one.
It is actually going to be an excellent one. Which leads me to our other guest. So Jonny Edward, he's an internationally renowned editorial portrait photographer and art director. He's also a creative educator and runs masterclass workshops for photographic artists. I can never say that word. Jonny,
hello.
Please help me. Welcome to Boris Effects Live.
I stumble on photographic as well. No, thank you so much for the warm intro, and I'm so excited to be here with you and the team. And yeah, it's going to be a wonderful, wonderful broadcast. Is that what we're calling these now? Broadcast episode?
That's the right phrase. I think like all of those words seem very, very strong for what we're doing here.
It's going to be a thing. It's going to be a good thing.
It's going to be a thing.
All right,
yeah,
there we go.
It's going to be a live thing that people are going to be watching with their eyeballs. I think that's all we can ask for.
Their eyeballs and their ears.
Yes. Maybe we could combine those two into one super organ at some
Hmm.
point, but the technology's not there
Only,
right now.
Can you
only that
composite
wasn't
that, Renee?
planned. Yeah, I can composite that. Yeah.
This is good. All right. Before we go too far down this rabbit hole, which I think we're already in, I mean, can you tell us just a little bit about yourself, please, Johnny?
Well, I'm a Libra and I enjoy rainy days.
Perfect.
And no, outside of that, I am a photographer by trade. I consider myself an artist more than anything else. But yeah, I'm a visual storyteller. I'm a lover of people, journeys, stories, life, travel, adventure. I don't know. It's weird. It's always hard to describe myself because I feel like I'm a different person in every moment and sort of every day. And I try and avoid encapsulation insofar as I can. But I think more than anything else, I'm a portrait photographer at my heart. And that really comes down to my two great passions in life are photography and people. And so getting an opportunity to sort of celebrate people and learn more about them and doing that through my lens has been the joy of a lifetime. And it's something that took me a very long time to get to. I studied biochemistry in college and electrical engineering. I was an EMT. I've owned gyms. I was in the digital marketing sector. I was a bricklayer, quite literally. I was in landscaping. I've sort of been a Renaissance person, a John of all trades, and master of very few. But I like to think that I'm moving towards some semblance of mastery in our art form. Not that I really believe that that exists. So that is a very verbose, abstract answer to a very direct question, and it's going to be a lot of
I
that today.
I love the fact that like having absorbed a lot of your art the last well actually since we confirmed that you were coming on, like the fact that you still don't consider yourself to have mastered that actually, I mean, two things: it surprises me and it infuriates me because like looking at those, looking at the some your work there is an absolute mastery that sort of shines through, not just obviously not just technically, though the technical stuff is there, but with the way that you're able to bring out different well I think different bits of humanity within people. And I was actually gonna talk a little bit more about this later, but I think can we just go, Brian? This is pop to link 3, please, because I want to ask a little bit about this one because
Please.
there's this sort of studied artifice to a lot of your images, like even these sorts of shots which have a kind of outdoors nature-ish kind of thing about it. There are some distinctly unnatural elements encroaching into them. What's the significance of that, or why is there that sort of I don't want to say the word dichotomy, but I'm going to.
No, I think dichotomy is perfect. All the D words, duality and whatnot. For me, I love juxtaposition. So I love contrast, not just obviously in light and shadow, which is the on the nose bit, but just in individuality. So in my imagery, if you have, let's say, a person who's in a very strong pose, but then, the facial expressions are very solemn. So anytime there's duality or juxtaposition, to me, it becomes more visually intriguing. But more importantly, I feel like it speaks more to humanity. I think that we are, equal parts, both sides of whatever that coin respectively is. And more often, we're sort of wading through this great multiplicity that is individuality. So I really like to bring that into my work. And for me, it feels like it speaks more to the human condition, as lofty as that might be. And it's just interesting. I mean, I could definitely wax on and on about the high art elements of this, but I just find it visually fascinating. And for me, that's great. I want to create something that I feel intrigued by. And then I also want to create work that other people feel intrigued by overtly, so that they stop in their tracks. And maybe at that point, their brain sort of pauses for a brief moment and they're able to read into the image to a greater degree and hopefully derive some semblance of narrative, whatever their interpretation of that narrative might be.
That's it. I mean, there's something to be said about also the location that you're shooting in. Especially for for shots like these. I think there's a definite the kind of the background says as much about, well, actually, and the chain fence in the foreground says as much about the subject as the subject itself. With regards to the location, I mean, is this something local, or are you going out further afield to find locations?
So in this case, this was at my old studio. Actually, it was several years ago, and this happened to be out back of the studio. So I didn't have to foray that far. We had this empty lot behind, but it was still selected for sort of this, barren nature, and it was sort of an industrial lot. So there was heavy machinery back there sometimes, but it was never really used for anything significant. And it was a cohabitated studio, so I never saw any of my studio mates go back there. So this was an editorial project, and I went, hey, we're sort of leaning into this idea. This was an ancillary element to that specific project, but it was sort of like a greaser type thing. So, toxic masculinity, machismo, cigarettes, PBR, fighting, blood, all the primitivism of that. And so I'm like, well, this is perfect. Blacktop and a blue sky and sort of, industrialization meeting natural environment. That was really fascinating to me. And I think I'm always sort of exploring individuality and the constraints that we put on ourselves and the constraints that society puts on us. So even the foreground element of that chain link fence, I feel like there's sort of this encapsulation happening to this individual who's being presented in a rather linear fashion. And that's something that, once again, we do internally, but that's also imposed upon us externally. But for editorial work like this, sometimes if I'm feeling particularly lazy, I'll literally just do with whatever's in arm's reach. But I've traveled out of state, I've traveled out of country for projects. So it's really, what are we trying to say, or what am I trying to say as an artist, or what are we trying to say as a team, and what location or environment is going to speak best to that and convey, that idea, that notion, that concept, those emotions, whatever it might be.
Well, I mean, without doxing yourself, then where are you based now?
Oh, I'm happy. My location is everywhere. I think I've been doxed several times at this point. So if you want to send me hate mail, positive mail, whatever, please just in care of, and send it directly to my studio. That'd be great. But I'm based in Denver. So I'm actually based in Denver, Colorado. And I'm actually outside. I'm in a little suburb called Westminster, Colorado, and no one would know what that is, although it sounds very fancy if I'm like, ooh, my studio's in Westminster, hello. But I'm in this sleepy little area of the city, and it's very generational. I have a lot of folks in their 70s around me who bring me, muffins and sweets and wingback chairs and things. So it's a pretty lovely area.
I mean, that sort of says, I mean, environment does tend to shape an artist. I mean, have you been shaped by Colorado then?
I think so. I think I was shaped by Colorado, and then I think there was a very direct effort to unshape myself. I think influence is great, but I never want an influence to define me. And when I start to feel that definition taking place, escapism sort of comes into play. So as soon as I noticed that I was being influenced by the natural environment and by the artists here and the communities here in the art scene, I'm like, all right, I need to travel so that I don't start getting put into sort of this one-dimensional box within my own being and mind. But absolutely, I mean, I love art books, and I've been, panning through all of Annie Leibovitz's most recent books over the past 2 decades. And if you see the work that I've created over the past 2 weeks, it's very heavily Leibovitz inspired. So I have to mind my manners when it comes to inspiration and influence, because I just start sort of integrating that into my process immediately, subconsciously, if not consciously.
Well, that's actually something I want to explore in a moment. Before we do that, could we maybe just have a little look at one of the shots and maybe just work on one of the shots a little bit, just to see some of your process, or the post process?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I want to sort of take the lead from that afterwards.
All right, let me screen share, and everyone. Wait, is that what we're doing? Correct?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Okay.
And while you're doing that, I'll let people know that obviously now is a good time to get your questions in still. And also head over to borisfxlive.com and join the competition if you haven't already done so. We will be doing our first little prize draw very, very soon. If you're enjoying the conversation so far, there's something that looks like that, give us one of them. So,
just to verify, can you see my screen? So I know I'm okay.
I think we're all good. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So this is essentially raw. I convert in Capture One. Obviously, this is already in Photoshop. I made no adjustments to it in Capture One, although I usually do that. This is my friend Chloe, and this was a personal project. So as a side note, I'm sure we'll get into this later in the bit, but I think it's very important for us as artists, whatever our medium is, to create personal work. It's really easy to get lost and mired in sort of the commercial side of things and the client side of things, but I sort of make at least weekly dates with myself to create solely for the sake of creating. So Chloe had this idea that she wanted to do this sort of sultry clown. And it's not normally my MO in terms of aesthetic, but she's a good friend. And I was like, let's just experiment with this. And if she's watching this, maybe I'm divulging too much, Chloe, I'm sorry, you can slap me later. But she's going through a lot of transitions personally. And so a lot of times I think I integrate elements of the individual into the images directly. And on this case, it's very in the nose, but she's sort of in this process of becoming in a metamorphosis as a woman and as an artist. So I love reflections. I love mirrors. I love this idea of how we interact with ourselves, how we see ourselves, how we perceive ourselves. So I brought a very cheap mirror onto a little ledge and just played with this reflection. In my mind, I knew that I wanted this to go black and white. So obviously right now it's color. And that's one of the things that I really do love about optics are all of the black and white features, specifically the film emulation, as well, of course, as the grain and those types of things. So I will jump right in here. I'm going to say this for all of you right out of the gate. I am a hack when it comes to editing and retouching. That's not self-deprecating. That's just the way it is. I would much rather be shooting and creating or exploring than sitting behind my computer editing. So everything that I do is all about efficiency. If I have a process that allows me to spend 5 minutes on an image instead of 15 minutes on an image, that's absolutely the direction I'm going to go. And that's one of the reasons, and I don't want this to sound like an elevator pitch, but that's one of the reasons I really enjoy optics is because I was using multiple tools before, like Alien Skin and Oniric and, you know, a couple of the DxO pieces of software, and they were all disparate. So now a lot of the effects that I want to use, I can get in one place. And for me, it's really about efficiency. You know, I love the software itself, but now that that's all under one roof, that's a big deal. And also, I tend to shoot series. If any of you know my work, you know that I very rarely present a single image at a time. I tend to shoot in 5, 10, 15, 25 images. So if I'm only spending 5 minutes on an image instead of 10 over the course of 25 images, that's hours of my life that I can allocate elsewhere to whatever else. So that's kind of my bit. But once again, I've done nothing on this. This is literally straight out of camera. And I do very little in the way of editing. There's no specific reason for that. I just prefer to keep things a little bit more organic, for lack of a better trending term. I don't even know if that's trending anymore, whatever. But let's just go ahead and get in here into optics. Do-do-do. Also, I like hum when I'm working. So if I start humming, someone please stop me so I don't embarrass myself. That'd be fantastic.
No, actually, you know, song is a very, very important part of the creative process.
I am of an age now. I realized I was out at the grocery store recently and I was like picking out avocados to make guacamole. Fascinating, I know. But I was like humming while I was doing it, and it was no specific tune. But this very sweet, mature woman, I presume she was in her 70s, was like, "Oh, that's a lovely tune. Like, are you making guacamole?" And I was like, "Yes." And I'm like, "Wow, I need to socialize more." Like, it was a thing. Anyway, we won't get into my lack of social life. And there really is a lack of social life because I'm so dedicated to my art. All right. So once again, I go in here. I'm going to say this outright. Obviously, Ben and Renee and everyone on the team already knows this. I am by no means an expert in this software. I use exactly what it is that I like. And even then, I probably don't use it properly. So at any point, you two, please chime in and say, "Johnny, here's a different way of using that," and make my process more efficient. I would actually love if you did that. That would be fantastic.
We got you, Johnny.
I appreciate you. So I'm really big. I know that this is going to be really cliche to say, but I love the analog aesthetic. I came up shooting film. I still shoot film. I shoot medium format. I shoot large format. I shoot, 35 millimeter format. And so I just love the look of that. So I love the film emulation in Boris. I use a lot of other tools in Capture One and elsewise, something. But we're just going to go ahead and start here and see what happens. All right, I'm going to go to film stock. Also, everyone, if you see me squinting at any point in time, I have a terrible habit of not wearing my contacts or glasses, especially when I should. So if you see me doing this, it's because I'm blind as a bat in my left eye. My brother stabbed me in the eye with the back of a spatula when I was younger, and that's a real story.
So this is part of the third act of questions that I've got.
It's yeah. I have a very contentious relationship with my brother. So I will say, shitty brothers aside, pardon the language, y'all. What I try and give myself a chance to do, whether I'm in Capture One or whether I'm in Photoshop or in Boris and Optics, is I really love to give myself a chance to play before I make any definitive decisions. Even though I'm a creative person, I tend to think very linearly, especially in post-processing. So I'll have an idea of what I want, but that's not necessarily what the best version of the image is going to be in my experience. So even in here, like I know I have certain film stocks and optics that I really like, especially for black and white, but I'm just going to give myself a chance to cycle through these because oftentimes I'll go, oh, I want, an Ilford stock. And then I'm like, ooh, this looks really great from Kodak or whatever it might be. So I think that's one area. You know, a lot of photographers I know, especially fashion, editorial, portrait photographers, they get very experimental when they're shooting and they're on set. They're like, ooh, I'm going to use this light from an angle that's unexpected. And they do that type of thing. Or, you know, I'm going to put a jacket on backwards and call it chic, whatever we're all doing. But when it comes to actually post-processing and editing, I feel like people have a very sort of straightforward process, and I get that. But I think there's something to be said about just allowing ourselves to play. I thought about this as I was prepping for our chat, this thing, before we actually jumped on earlier. And I remember being very young, and I was a nerd, shocker. And I had like a bootleg copy of Photoshop. Sorry, Adobe, I'm currently on the level. But I had a pirated copy of Photoshop, and I had like, it was like a water droplet brush or something. And I just started clicking, and I'm like, whoa, that's super cool. That looks like a water droplet on this image. And the reason I'm referencing that is because there was this awe about it. And so I try and maintain that level of awe in all aspects of my creative process, but especially in post-processing. So while it may only take me 5 or 10 minutes to edit an image when all is said and done, the first image in a series like this, I may give myself a half hour to explore. And obviously we won't take that long right now with me just going, oh, that's neat, high contrast. But generally speaking, if you saw me working on the first image in a set, I am going to give myself a chance to just purely play. And that's for all things. I'm going to look at exposure. I'm going to look at contrast. I'm going to look at levels. I'm going to look at curves. I'm going to look at different film stocks, different styles, different presets, different color grades. And at some point, something's just going to click. And I'm a very intuitive artist, and that even though I have an engineering type mindset, at some point something will just feel right for me. And it's usually when that something feels right that I'm like, all right. And then I just make a decision and I go with that. I'm not saying it's the best decision, but it's the decision that I decide upon. And I sort of just have to cement that in. You'll also see, everyone, Renee's probably going to beat me with a hickory stick after this, but I edit very destructively. I'm just going to get that out of the way. Obviously, if I'm working on commercial work, I don't do that. But for personal work, or generally speaking, client work, I end up flattening all my layers. And that's because I'm so indecisive. All of you will see me go through this in real time, but I have like, it's a pathology, my level of indecisiveness. So if I leave my layer stack whole, I'll wake up in a cold sweat at like 3:25 a.m. and come down to the studio and go, maybe the opacity on that should be 18% instead of 27. Like, we're just going to go ahead and see this. And I'll have 17 iterations, final version 1, final version 17, Finn. I start getting into other languages at some point. I've become very Parisian, you know, Finn. Not that I can speak French. I can say omelette du fromage. So that's a Dexter's laboratory thing for those of you who are familiar from back in the day. But that's about the extent of my French. But anyway, I'm just going through here, and I'm not looking for anything particular right now. Like I said, this is just very exploratory and experimental. I do actually, right off the bat, like this heavy vignette. I like these inky blacks. I like taking, I'm going to be completely honest, Chloe. Once again, if you're watching this, I'm not saying this to admonish anything. I was expecting Chloe to come in style differently for this. I actually thought it was going to be more of, like, speaking of Parisian, like an old world, turn of the century clown with like full makeup and sort of a baggy outfit. And she came in looking very sexy. She was a very sexy clown. And so that's not exactly what I had in mind for the concept. So even going to black and white, for me, this takes a little bit of that out and makes it a little bit more brooding, a little bit more macabre, a little bit more haunting, maybe a little bit more, I don't know, psychologically complex. And I'm probably just projecting here, as we all do. But I really like that idea for black and white. So as I'm going through here, I'm really liking what I'm seeing in terms of high contrast, deep blacks, bright whites, and even this vignette that's kind of coming in some of these. I really like what's going on with that, just to sort of narrate. And I don't know, the rest of you, I know some of you are educators out there as well, but I've been doing a lot of workshops and mentoring and things, and I narrate everything in my life now. It's actually a problem. Like, I could be getting ready in the morning and I'm like, I'm putting on my left pant leg first because I have better balance on my right leg. And I'm like, who the hell am I talking to? What am I doing? But that's more of a me problem than any of you. So anywho, I'm just going through here. And once again, I'm not looking for anything specific. I really like this. Once again, this retro bit is super fun. Let's actually just run with this. I'm going to make a decisive decision here so that I don't tie us up for the whole, 2-hour stream with me just looking at different black and white variants. But I will say I give this a go. One thing that I do love in here for the film emulation is obviously we have all of our variables here on the right side of our panel, depending on how you have this set up. So we can really easily go to something like curves and start making modifications to the contrast and intensity of this. This is actually really cool versus a lot of other pieces of software plugins that I've used because this is all centralized. So in real time, I could just sort of come over here and start playing around. Let's get this to something right about here. The highlights are a little bit bright, so I'm going to take my highlights down. Whoa, way too matte. Not feeling that. All right. once again, whenever I'm doing something, I very rarely do lives like this with editing or retouching. And I kind of feel like, you know, when you were a kid and you had dreams of being naked in front of the class, I'm feeling very exposed right now.
Oh, good.
Maybe
That's
we
how
should
we
be doing
want it.
a different stream then. I think
Our,
That's
the
that's our
artistic
only
strip.
stream.
that's it.
Okay,
I
so
mean, while you're looking through this, then I
yeah,
mean, one of the questions is
please.
like how important are those presets for you then when you're just starting to explore?
To me, they're incredibly important because it allows me to quickly assess different iterations of the image. So sometimes it's not even that I'm going to use one of these. Like at points, I might just go to a standard black and white conversion and use that. But for me, as an exploratory element, they're massive. Because especially for color, I mean, for black and white, I knew where I was going to go with this, and I'll actually deconstruct an image that I'm going to edit in color a little bit later in our thing. But for me, you know, going back to color, I might have an idea of, let's say, warm tones, creams and taupes, and then I see something that's cool, and it's cyans and periwinkle blues, you know, or whatever blue it might be. And I'm like, wow, I really love that. So I tend to be very constricted in my mindset about what I'm envisioning. And so it allows me to very quickly see other potential outputs and assess those in real time. So it's a really big part of my process, to be completely honest. So having this at my fingertips allows me to just explore what that image might look like, how it might feel, what it might convey. And so as I'm looking at these two, I'm really assessing emotionality as much as I am aesthetic. And emotion is something that's near and dear to my heart and that I try and infuse all of my imagery with. So if I'm going for a certain emotional impact, once, you know, here, this evaluation of self and intention and metamorphosis and all of this, I'm going, all right, what gets my stomach churning a little, right? Like which one of these presets or styles that I'm using, what makes me sort of lurch into this or step back? And I know that's sort of a vague answer to it, but it's the general bit. I hope that was helpful. So I'm already looking at this, and one thing that I usually add, I will say, practically speaking, I use a lot of filters in my work, and when I say filters, I mean diffusion filters, black mist, pro mist, from all the different companies. I have vintage filters, but because I'm legitimately, seriously ADHD, oftentimes I'll think about using it, and I'll just forget to actually put it on my lens. And so one of the features in optics that I really love is the diffusion filter feature with all the different types of diffusion. And I normally stack that on top. So for those of you who aren't familiar with optics, we can actually stack layers here and create our own layer stack for sort of a multiplying effect or for varied effects while we're in the suite itself. So generally speaking, I'll use something like a film stock or film emulation. I'll combine that with a diffusion filter, and then I might also add in grain or a look or something else like that. The other thing that I really like about doing this is I could have 17 layers here and then it's easily replicable. So because I work with series, I can go ahead and just save this. And then when I come to the next image, just apply the thing in mass instead of having to start from scratch. I know that's pretty basic, but for me, that's fundamentally badass and I'm a big fan of it.
The setups are the best. The setups are my absolute favorite.
It's rad. And once again, it saves me so much time. And I'm one of those people, like I use actions in Photoshop as well. And I literally have to take a photo with my phone to see what layers are there. And I know you can save it in Photoshop in a different way as well, but it's not as efficient. And I'll like actually not only photograph the layers, which actions I'm using, but what opacity they're at. So in here, being able to just use that and boom, bring it back up. And I'm like, hey, 2 weeks ago when I was editing Chloe, I had that really deep macabre kind of black and white, and then getting that back in mass with all of those layers that are still editable. And I could change opacity, add, remove. It's really, really cool. And it makes my life easy. So anything that I could do to make my life easier, I am very much into. Same thing here as far as exploring. I know that I love the mist filter as far as the diffusion options in here, but I'm just going to allow myself to take a quick look at some of these. This actually popped up the blur element. And I'm like, oh, that's kind of neat. I don't love it at that opacity, but of course we can change our opacity up and down. And I'm not going to get into it now, but this is something I might explore. I might actually play with a little bit of masking here too. I think it could be fun if there was a little bit more blur in the mirror. So it's, hey, I'm looking at myself in the mirror, but I'm not seeing myself clearly. We all sort of perceive ourselves in a distorted fashion. We all deconstruct ourselves. So in my mind, as I'm going through these edits and these options are linking to narrative. They're linking to storytelling. They're linking to emotion. Sometimes I'll be completely honest. I'll just look at something. I'm like, hey, that's cool. And I'll run with it. But normally speaking, my process has a little bit more depth and complexity to it. And that's rooted in, experience, journey, some semblance of storytelling and whatnot. But we're going to go ahead and put that back up, and we're going to leave that be for right now. And we're going to kind of come over to one of my faves because it's what I know, and I like messing with what I know. So obviously the nice thing about these mists is there's cool mist, there's warm mist, there's dark mist, there's black mist, and each one of them just has a different effect. I won't get into deconstructing that. I think it's much better for all of you to just jump into optics yourself and sort of give these a look. But I do like what's happening with these diffusion sort of overlays, filters. What are we calling these? What would we call these, Renee? What's the specific technical term for this?
I just call them filters.
Filters. All right. Well, diffusion filter.
Ben
I'm the
might
product
correct me on
manager's
what it...
mouth. I know I'm
No,
correct.
I'm calling these filters as well. They're definitely
Okay,
filters.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm on spot. So now, as I'm looking at this automatically, I love this warm mist. I like the sort of sepia tone that's coming with this because it makes the image feel a little bit older to me too, right off the gate. And I know that's super on the nose, but what I'm going to do is just take what we have here. And we're at warm mist 8. Maybe we'll go down to 6 or so. And I know I could just go to a lower version of this instead of changing opacity, but I'm going to do it my way. I'm going to be very Frank Sinatra about this. And now that's starting to look nice. I like the diffusion that's happening. I like how it's sort of, adding a little bit of warmth into it. And that's pretty darn close to sort of what I was envisioning in my mind. And yeah, overall, once again, I know that this isn't very refined. I know that this isn't very polished, but this is how I sort of operate for process, especially when I'm looking at the first image in a series. So what I might do here too is just add another layer and just take a look at some other things that we have going on in here. And I told you I'm going to be squinting a lot, everyone. Pardon me. I love grain. I love texture in my images. It's sort of ironic. I was talking to a friend of mine about this recently, and I shoot Sony and I shoot the A7R series and I shoot with Sigma glass, and it's all about, resolution and detail. And then I wind up throwing 3 diffusion filters on top of my lens, and I use diffusion filters in here, and I shoot something at 100 ISO so there's no noise, and then I add grain in. So there's all of these little ironies in my creative process that I could probably use like a power shot camera point and shoot from 20 years ago that would have cost me $50 and get a very similar aesthetic out of the gate. But we're not going to get into any of that right now. We'll just go ahead and avoid that. All right, so let's see. We're just going to go ahead and play with grain here. So I'm going to zoom in and see what's actually happening. Once again, I'm just going to give myself a chance to see what is what. Ooh, it's getting very tabular there. So I know it's hard to see on these streams sometimes, but we could see what's happening is that grain is adding in. I don't necessarily want that much. I do love that we have grain in all of these different channels. One thing we're going to get into, and I'm going to flop through it. Renee gave me homework to learn how to do this properly, and I bombed on it. Renee, I'm so sorry. I love you. But one thing that I love about
beat you with the hickory. Well, I'll beat you with the hickory stick later. It's fine.
That's cool. I mean, everyone like that'll be the end of the stream is me just getting wailed on by the product team for bombing.
The thing is, though, Jonny, you get to pick the stick that you're going to get hit with.
Want to go with the standard rule of thumb type of thing?
Oh, now we're getting biblical. This is gone a different direction now.
We'll go with rule of cuff. All right, this is a Jonny thing.
There we
I'm always
go.
trying to do Jack. It's rule of cuff. No one comment on that. Don't send the hate mail to Boris. Send it to me once again. If you include some glitter, I would love that. I'm a very big glitter person. So anyway, I love that this is here. One thing that I'll do in a future image, so I don't get mired up in this as I'm talking over myself right now, is you can use masking in optics, and you can use masking specific to luminosity. So one thing that I like to do is add differing levels of grain into different parts of the image. And that is to say, hey, I'm going to have more grain in shadows or versus highlights and whatnot. And to me, that gives a much more realistic picture of something analog feeling, simply because grain isn't dispersed across the image equally in most of those film stocks, and especially depending on how it's being developed. But I'm just going to leave this as is for right now so I don't get lost in the weeds. We'll make fun of me a little bit later. Like at the halfway point, I'll do it, and we can collectively laugh at my lack of finesse. We'll call it that. So anyway, I'm just playing with all of this again. I'm just going to play with the softness. And these are all little things. I honestly don't ever read like facts or manuals about software, about hardware, or anything else. I sort of just get in and try and break things and see what's what. That's my process for this. So even this tool, I'm just going to go ahead and toy around with it. And we're going to call that good for now. And I'm just going to go ahead and apply this. Now, one thing that I didn't do that I should have done, and any good editor or retoucher or post-processor would have done, is copy my layer before making this change, and I did not. So I apologize to all of you who are out there probably commenting right now. Why did you do that directly to your layer? Once again, I'm a destructive mofo, so I'm going to leave that at standard. Versus where we were at, I'm really loving where this went. This is sort of what I was envisioning in my mind for this photo. There might be some idiosyncrasies that I change now that I'm actually looking at it full image again. The highlights might just be a smidge bright. I might go into something like dodge and burn in Photoshop just to burn down a little bit of this on the arm because it's catching my attention, especially relative to these darker parts of the image. And I might bring a little bit more highlight into the face. by dodging there. But overall, this is pretty much spot on. And if I went with this moving forward, I would basically just use that exact same layer stack that I created in Optics. And then each one of the successive images that I brought into Photoshop, I would just open in Optics, boom, drop that stack on top. And then I have a cohesive set through and through. I'm giving myself a little bit more time up front to come to these terms. And then I'm just putting those terms arbitrarily onto any of the other images that meet the constraints of this specific look or set, as it were. So yeah. I think that's a good start. Is that workable?
I think that's great. I think that's great. I've actually got well, there's a ton of questions that have come through.
Okay.
I've got one question, one comment. So in total, that's 2 comments. The first one is, I admire your bravery. Like, absolutely working destructively is so anathema to me. It's it actually, yeah, it's just completely against every single part of my being, and I absolutely applaud it. I think, what was it that you call it, Renee?
What, the work of a madman?
Yes, but when you were being like a timid mouse or something, what was the phrase?
I call it the hold on one second here. My brain has swirled on me for a second. I normally call them anxiety squirrels, but no, there's the indecisive mice.
Indecisive mice. Yes, perfect.
Yeah, I'm the indecisive mice when it comes to editing.
Yeah.
And it's oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, carry on, please.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, to that end, literally. And for me, like, I understand, like, I don't, people are like, oh, I edit destructively because of file size. Storage is cheap. There's nothing practical about it. It's simply to allow me to carry forward. Especially when I get to this, I will get stuck in that editing process, sort of the variance more than anything else. So I've found over the course of time that that's the way that I sort of get through it. I just punch through it. And then once that decision is made, I can carry on, or I will obsess. Like, you will literally see me sitting there for like 6 hours straight, Hunter S. Thompson style, just trying, 4 different things, chain smoking cigarettes and, taking peyote to try and see things from a clear point of view. So it's just how my brain works. I remember the first workshop that I ever did was out in LA with a friend of mine, Aaron J. Young. And we got to the retouching portion of what we were doing. And there was a brilliant retoucher who had attended because she wanted to learn studio light. And as I was flattening my layers, I was making eye contact with her directly and watching her go, and just sort of shudder.
That's it. I mean, it was a knot that sort of welled up in my stomach. But I think it's amazing because what that does is it shows that you have conquered what I think is probably one of the most important questions that I get asked is, when do you know that it's time to stop? And usually, like, the answer to that question on commercial projects is when the budget is running out. When you have to move to the next image to actually make the deadline. But when you've got, like, a complete free hand in all of this, when is the time to say stop? I mean, that's something that I go back and forth on, like, all the time. It's like I'll happily revisit old work again, and because it's just there, I'm able to tweak and I'm able to get it better. Is it better? No, it's different. And I think that's the issue, is that by making that strong decision when you think you need to make it, you've taken that choice out of your hands, so you have to move forward with it. I mean, the question comes to me then is, are you ever wrong when you flatten?
Frequently. I mean, I think what'll happen too is, I'll come back to things even the next day and I'll look at it and I'll go, oh, that's not right. And I'll just start from scratch. That's also easy for me because I'm so light-handed in my editing. My workflow is so, sort of baser, and it's so, I don't necessarily want to call it efficient. I'll say hackneyed. I don't know what the right phrase or word is, but like, I can get back to a point of finality very quickly. So if I was going through a very in-depth workflow on something, let's say a commercial workflow, that would be a different story. Like, I wouldn't want to start over and have to spend an hour and a half getting back to that point B to then go to point C. However, since I'm making minor adjustments in Capture One, very minor adjustments, let's say through dodge and burn or some basic skin cleanup in Photoshop, and then polishing things off using something like optics. Getting back to that point isn't causing me a lot of heartache. But yeah, that actually does happen a lot. And I'll look at it, even that sepia tone that I was talking about. I'll probably come back to that later once we're off the stream, and I'll go, oh, that's cliche trite. Like, what was I thinking? That's so generic and awful. And then I'll have a little meltdown and go, oh, I did that live in front of people, and everyone's judging me. And then I'll feel self-loathing, and I'll eat some Ben and Jerry's and take a bath and listen to Enya, circle back, let go of all the bullshit, and then start anew. So,
Nice.
The creative flow, basically.
There's actually one good question from the comments, Ben, if you don't mind if I ask it. It's relevant
please.
to this moment. To Jonny, your models/humans always look natural. How much do you alter/retouch is based on your own preferences and ethics, or is it something dictated by your clients?
So
that's a very good question.
That's a brilliant question. I'm going to do the political thing. I'm going to buy myself time. I'm going to be like, thank you so much for asking that question. It's fantastic. And where I'm going to start with that. No, but that is a really good question. And I think most of it has to do with, it's my own personal bit. And I like skin texture. I like variance. I think especially, gaining on in decades here myself, I think there's something inherently beautiful about what makes us unique and different. And I know that's, sort of passe to say, but there is so much beauty in that and differential. So I try and be as light-handed as possible simply because I want to represent someone as authentically as possible. However, I will add a caveat to that. I was just talking with a friend of mine yesterday who was here in the studio, Aaron. And, we were saying the thing about it is we talk about authenticity and imagery. However, when we're interacting with each other, if Renee and Ben and I were sitting around together, drinking copious quantities of coffee like I am, all shaking just a little bit, and looking at each other, at no point are we like this. At no point are we completely still 1 inch away from the other person's face. And there's even micro movements. So from an evaluative perspective, there already is a lack of authenticity in an image. And that's not even talking about dimensionality and things like that. So for me, I want someone in a photo to be represented as I saw and experienced them in that moment. And that essentially dictates the level of retouching that I'm going to do. And also relative to lighting, of course, if I'm using hard directional lighting, there's going to be more skin texture. I'm not going to try and nullify skin texture in that lighting setup. If I want less skin texture, I'll change my lighting. And that's happening in real time on set. I will say, I think one of the big things that influenced me this was years ago. It must have been about 6 or 7 years ago when I was first really getting into portraiture and studio work. I had a brilliant client, Jamia, really, really stunning woman. And she came to me and she wanted photos. And at that point in time, I was barely even making money. And she's like, I'm going to pay you this amount. And I was like, like, I don't deserve, no, don't pay me money. I don't deserve it. Put me back in my chamber. Like, that type of mindset. But she paid me and we created just these stunning photos. And even for me, as self-loathing as I was as an artist at that point in time, she was so empowered and powerful and radiant and strong. And it was just, even now, like the hair is standing up on my arms. You can't see it because it's so damn blonde, but it is. But they were these really phenomenal photos. And she had this little mark on her neck. And I probably erroneously thought it was, a dehydration mark like we get or something like that and didn't pay enough attention to it. So I eliminated this. And I sent her the photos and she sends something back gushing. And it was immediate validation for me. She's like, oh my God, I love these. And I was like, oh, thank the gods, goddess, whomever, whatever, the spaghetti monster in the sky, whatever you believe in. Like, thank the universal powers that be. This turned out well. I can now take this money and spend it on something other than ramen and feed myself. Brilliant. But she's like, hey, Jonny, you did do one thing, though, that I want to talk to you about. And I was like, what's that? She's like, you took away that mark on my neck. And I'm like, oh, I just assumed that you wouldn't want that there. Well, it turns out that she was in a domestically abusive relationship and her husband had cut her in the neck and throat. And that scar was a symbol of her warriordom, of her survivorship. And so I had taken away her power. That was her proof that she had survived that experience. And right now, even I'm like welling up. And in that very moment, it fundamentally changed how I approached retouching people, to not be assumptive, to not presume that someone doesn't like a thing about themselves or they want that gone. If I'm ever conflicted or confused, I'll just ask. I'll ask outright, and I would rather be completely communicative. But the way that I approach retouching and processing with skin is if it's something that's part and parcel to the person, I don't touch it. If it's transient, if they have a volcano-esque pimple on their forehead, I've never gotten rid of that and had someone go like, hey, please bring that back. It was just about to pop and it was at its apex and I want to archive that. Like, I've never had that happen. So that's sort of my de facto approach. when it comes to this. And also, obviously, I don't want to call myself a purist, but I do love doing things right on set. And that's not even about like, oh, I'm a good photographer because I don't work in Photoshop, Pilgrim, or whatever the John Wayne impersonation would be. It's more just like I feel more fulfilled doing it that way. And I really like to talk about that. When I look at my work and I could see something straight out of camera and it's 99% of the way, it's not because it makes me feel like a professional. It's because I feel like I did right by the person in front of me. I feel like I took the time to honor them and to celebrate them through light, through shadow, through set design, through color. And that makes me feel better as an artist. And that's purely the end of it. But yeah, and also, I mean, I think part of that natural element too, and this is sort of metaphysical, but outside of the actual textural elements of someone's skin, people look very relaxed and calm and confident and assured in the photos because of the connection element. And obviously, we're not here to speak directly to that. But when someone is feeling comfortable, you're going to get this dimensional element of them at ease. And that itself is going to lend an organic and natural and almost colloquial quality to the photo. Because if I'm sitting here and Ben's posed me and he's posed my elbow and my chin and my shoulder, and then I'm like this, and he's like, yeah, look at all those triangles in the photo. And I'm like, versus if we're just talking, he's like, oh, Johnny, I love how you fell into that pose. Can you just hang out there for a second? I'm like this. And he's like, yeah, but don't smile. And I'm like, all right. And then I get this. It's just so easeful and it's so real and it's so conversational. So I think outside of the actual textural considerations, I have a very conversational way of photographing people. And even if we're stepping into an area that might be sorrow laden or macabre or something like that, I want them to feel comfortable and safe and confident in whatever space they're in, not just physically, but internally, and with me being present to that.
That's actually,
Well, I mean,
that speaks a lot to, like, you know, for myself when I get into the studio and when I'm working with somebody. So I had somebody one time who had a large number of self-harm scars. And, you know, they were older, they're in their mid 40s, you know, and I didn't even notice them when we were shooting. I didn't even see them. And then in post-production, obviously I see them and I'm going, and I started having this conversation with myself, do I edit these out or do I not? Because they know that they're there, right? And so I just, you know, normally I would have those conversations, I would notice them ahead of time and say, hey, just wanted to know, is this something that, like, does this, you know, like you're saying, how it represents their survivorship, you know, it represents something that they got over? Or is it something that they're just like, that's not who I am anymore, I would rather it not be represented in the photo? So normally I have those conversations very directly with my subject, you know, carefully, considerately.
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
But at the same time, I'm having a direct conversation normally. I hate having to send the email later where my intention and my emotion behind the question cannot be interpreted and it's just straight up words.
Agreed.
So, you know, it was a learning experience at that point to just be like, really pay attention to the subject that's in front of me and just be like, okay, are these things here? Are you comfortable with me leaving them in, or do you want them removed out?
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. And I also think that's where something like experience comes into play too, because obviously to be able to hold all of those, and I'm not speaking to your experience, but in general, for those of you out there who may be earlier on in your journey, it's very hard as a photographer to hold all of these disparate pieces of information in your mind simultaneously. So they're all domains of knowledge. We have our lighting and we have our framing and we have obviously all of the specifics and technical elements of camera settings. And then we have posing and then we have set design and we have all of these things. So don't chide yourself if you're like, oh, you know, I didn't realize this thing in the photo itself, because you're working on one specific domain. So I always just like to speak to that too. Yeah, and I love just speaking about this openly, because for me, I think 5 years ago, 10 years ago, when I was just getting into this, one of the things that really helped me was seeing people whom I respected and admired making mistakes. That was actually hugely liberating for me, because in my mind, it was like Fantasia, right? I thought about these photographers and I assumed that they walked in and a symphony was playing and the lights sort of moved around them and they sat down and took 2 frames and they're like, magic. And then they just sauntered off. So seeing these people get to a point where they were frustrated, they're like, oh, everything's fucking going wrong, and their light's not working, and the tethering's not working, and the computer's dying, and their camera's shitting out, and all of these things. I'm like, oh, wait, like you struggle with these things too, despite being at the level that you're at. So I love having these conversations so that there's not a deification that occurs. We all struggle. We all make mistakes. To err is human. To fail is growth. So yeah, anyway, just side note.
I think actually that's really important, because I think over the last 15 years at least, we've seen a huge growth in behind the scenes kind of footage of photo shoots happening, and yet most of those, in fact, I would say that all of those that I've seen, they don't actually show the reality of what's happening on a particular shoot. They are obviously they're carefully edited,
Yep.
and they are edited, generally speaking, around the frustration. So they're only showing the bits where everything goes right, everyone's kind of happy, the shot is hitting exactly where it should do. It's that boom boom. You're not seeing all of the other ones that just aren't quite hitting to kind of get exactly where you need to go. Like the small movements in the lights, the throwing things at the assistant, all of that stuff gets edited out.
Never done that. No.
For better or worse. Well, I'm glad you haven't. You're
I've had things thrown at me as an assistant.
yeah. Yes, this is it.
No, but that's a salient point. And I think for me, one thing that I really like doing is it sounds silly, but I love taking time lapses of what I'm doing. And obviously you're not getting the nitty gritty of that, but it really illustrates, if you watch me on set, how much I move my lights. Like I actually should have time lapse doing this setup right now for our stream, because the amount of time that I put in, I actually have 7 lights going right now. And all of them were sort of set up relative. And this one was higher and this one was lower. And then I was playing with color temperature. And then the backlight was overpowering. So I'm here. And for me, it looks very harmonious. I like this a lot. But to dial it into this point, it was 45 minutes. I was taking off my jacket. I was sweating. I was gross. I was grunting, carrying one of my lights, like 700 pounds, doing a strongman event, moving this thing around like an idiot. And so there was all of this work that went into something that ultimately looks cohesive and like it was just there. But that's sort of the bit, is to get to that point where something looks effortless takes a monumental amount of effort. And there is an avoidance of that. And I think there's also an avoidance of failure. People want to come across as masters of their craft. And especially when it comes to clients, like, well, I don't want to have to move a light or change anything when a client's there. And for me, it's ultimately humanizing. I think that if a client walks in and they're not familiar being in front of the camera, there's automatically a hierarchy, right? We photograph beautiful people. We create magic. We've shot magazine covers. So as they're looking at us, they're looking up at us in hierarchy. And so anything that we can do that brings us back down, our fails, our feebles, our mess ups, they actually humanize us. One of my ridiculously cliche tricks is if someone's really uncomfortable in front of my camera, I'll leave my lens cap on and I'll start bitching about it. I'll go like, oh man, like my camera's not working. I'm so sorry. I'm like, we'll extend the session out. Like it's really my bad. And then they'll go, Johnny, your lens cap is on. And I'm like, oh yeah, you're probably upset about all the money you're paying me, huh? My bad. I'm so sorry. Like we'll get back to this. Immediately the energy changes, because no longer am I the Johnny. No, I'm just a person and I mess up, I make mistakes, and it's beautifully humanizing. And then instead of this sort of lording type eye to eye, we're just right here and we're together and we're in a space together, and then we can focus on doing what it is we're there to do. Not only does it not make us look less professional, it actually makes us look more human and more real. And when we're real and we're authentic, we create space for other people to be real and authentic. And it's so important.
Yeah.
I want to get back to this, but we do have to do a little bit of business. So we're going to take a tiny break, because I'm otherwise I'm going to get shouted at. If you're enjoying the stream up till now and you haven't done so already, hit one of those, please. It costs you nothing. It makes a big deal for us and for me personally. If you haven't done so already, head over to borisfxlive.com and join in our competition. We are giving away not 1, not 2, but 3 one-year subscriptions to Optics, which we saw a little bit later, and we will be seeing a bit more as well in just a moment. And one lucky winner is going to be sauntering, possibly dancing, probably off with a 1-year subscription to the Boris Effects suite. That's everything that we make, including Optics, Sapphire, Continuum, Mocha Pro, Silhouette, Crumple Pop, Synthesize, Particle Illusion Pro. What have I forgotten? I've forgotten something. I don't have my special cheating t-shirt on, so I can't look at the logos today. But yes, join us for that. Now the question goes out to Mission Control. Are we ready with the Magic Tombola? Apparently we are. We're ready to give away our first copy of Optics to one lucky winner.
Uh-oh.
So yeah, without any further ado, let's spark that up. Spinning. I'm pulling out a name, and that first name is Suzanne Offner or Susanna Offner. Congratulations, Susanna. You are our first winner of the stream. Congratulations on winning optics. We are going to be giving away more optics in just a little bit, so get those entries in now. Of course, full terms and conditions apply, and they can be found at borisfxlive.com. All right, we've been getting some really good questions coming through the chat as well. I want you to keep those questions coming. If we haven't asked or answered your question so far, they haven't been forgotten. They're in my big list. Look, I've got a book now. Got a book. See, I used to have post-it notes or generic gummed paper notes, but no. For Jonny, I've pulled out the book. So
Wow.
I am honored, friend. Thank you.
You should be. You should be. It is a
I
great
doff
honor,
my hat.
obviously. Before we get back into it, Renee, there's something special about October, isn't there?
Yeah,
There's many special things about October.
I know. There's so many things special about October. Yeah, it is my favorite month, obviously.
Confirmed.
We do have, if you're interested in trying out optics, we do have optics free for the month. So you can go to borisfx.com/sinister shots and you can enter our competition. So you can download it for free and you can make images and then enter them in our competition. So you post them onto Instagram and you're going to tag BorisFX and you're going to use the hashtag BorisFX and hashtag Sinister Shots to get your images entered. You can go to the website right now and just scroll down. You can see the winners that we picked so far. We are doing one per week. And then we also have a People's Choice Award as well, which is very fun. So we're giving away all kinds of things. We have lots of optics prizes. We have lots of, we have Adobe subscription and some Wacom tablets and some super secret squirrel stuff that we're not talking about yet to get everybody involved. So yeah, definitely make sure that you download if you're wanting to try it out. Like I said, it's free for the month. And we would love to see you making some sinister, spooky images with it. That would be very fun.
There's some really, really cool stuff being made so far. And also, if you don't have access to your own material, we're also giving away a ton of sample shots, courtesy of our friends at
TrueRef. Yeah, TrueRef
Thank you
was
very much.
very, very kind to donate a whole bunch of images for us. So if you're a digital artist and you don't necessarily work with your own photography, TrueRef has been wonderful. She built together a whole pack for us. So that's also going to be included in your download. And so, yeah, you have something to start with if you're not really sure where to start.
Yep, tons of stuff. And there's you've got a little bit over a week. If you're watching live, it's a bit over a week to still get your entries in. Do it now, please. Alrighty. Well, let's come back now. I mean, there's the number of questions I've got to ask you has not gotten any smaller, Jonny, I'm afraid. Can we, Brian, can we head to link 1 for a second, please? Because I want to talk about this shot because I absolutely love this shot in so many different ways. But it kind of makes. Is there a certain type of lighting setup that you gravitate towards for your portraits?
Oh, we lost your audio.
Oh, you're
Jonny.
muted. You're muted.
I didn't want anyone to hear me being gassy from too much coffee over here. Sorry about that all. I'm talking about burps. Don't get weird. It's fine. Anyway, no, so I really like both hard and soft light. I'm a big fan. And so oftentimes I'll modulate hard light sources, smaller light sources with larger light sources. So for instance, right now, and then I'll speak to this image, like I have this 30-inch Octa that's close to me as sort of like a smaller light source to sort of carve out the facial features, show off the jawline, the cheekbones, all the things. And then thank you. Right behind that, then I have 150 centimeter. I just go back and forth between inches and centimeters to confuse people. There's a 150 centimeter Octa that's stacked right behind it at a much lower power. So it's no specific ratio, but oftentimes I'll use a harder, smaller light source to sort of carve out features and for an element of theatricality. And then I'll bring in additional soft light sources to modulate shadows, both on the subject and within the scene itself. And I love layered lighting. Clearly, I love dramatic lighting. I know I don't seem like a dramatic person, so that's probably hard to wrap your minds around. However, I'm very driven by theater. I'm very driven by cinema. And so I tend to light things separately in the scene. Even back here, I'm lighting the very back behind the backdrop. I'm lighting the backdrop itself. I'm backlighting me and I'm front lighting me with the key, and then two different types of fill, one affecting primarily me and then the rest affecting the environmental elements of the scene. So this specifically was two vintage Fresnels, like the old Lowell Fresnels that I probably bought off of Facebook Marketplace for 25 bucks, you know, from a person who had them on for 10 minutes, touched them and burned their finger. And they're like, I don't want any part of this.
I was going to say the ones that you can heat your house with.
Quite literally, yeah. Like, you know, you get close enough, and I have them on in the summer in my studio that's already 100 degrees Fahrenheit, and everyone's just sweating, and I'm like, we're doing it for the gram, just deal with it. But that was two Fresnels, and then I was modulating that with what was probably something like a 7-foot umbrella with a diffusion sock on top of it, and just lifting those shadows to maintain some of that shadow detail. But it's directionality, it's drama, it's theatricality, and then of course I'm heavily influenced by, you know, Caravaggio and all of the other psychos from back in the day who were brilliant painters, but very curious individuals. So
that's a good way to put it. Are you ever mixing strobe and continuous light? Or
yeah.
Are you, yeah.
I love doing that. So I have beautiful natural light in my studio. Obviously, I have a whole horde of constant lights and strobe. I love mixing those to effect. So I use shutter drag a lot and different things like that. And whether I'm just working on blur or even just using constant lights as a base and then using a strobe on top of that, going back to it, there's a certain clinical look to strobes in a studio with the sensors that we're using these days that I don't care for. So if I can use constant lights as a base and bring in a strobe to sort of carve out the individual, but then have even a little bit of softness that's coming in from that shutter being a little bit slower, to me, that just feels more, I don't know if it's romantic or poetic or it's purely placebo, but it drives me process-wise. So yeah, I love intermingling light sources.
You must be using vintage lenses as well. Then I'm assuming a lot of like fixed lenses and stuff like that.
I have all the stuff. I even have old projector lenses. I have like a whole suite of things from Minolta and Pentax. I use, you know, medium format lenses adapted to my Sony and all of those things. I still do like the 1990s music video, like lens slap, you know, having a vintage lens off the camera and shooting it like that for distortion. So once again, for me, it's like anything that I can do to make myself feel like an artist. When I'm doing that, even if it's a silly played out technique, I'm like, yeah, dude, like I was at the exact right bit. I was using Mylar and I had my lens like a tilt shift off my camera and I was getting dust on my sensor because it's about the art. It's not about the gear. And look at this weird expansive thing. And then whether it was intentional or not, the person's face is blurred and I could come after the fact and be like, you know, it's just because our essence is constantly shifting relative to societal expectation. Normally that's before the fact, but yeah, if I have to build some meaning in after, I'm not opposed to compositing meaning in after the fact.
Perfect.
Well, when you're putting together this you know, your equipment list for a shoot, then, you know, how, working backwards a little bit from that, how detailed are the briefs that you get from your clients, and you know, where does that process start to sort of form? You know, what sort of latitude are you given in those sort of early stages when you're putting the ideas together?
So these days, I'm very grateful to say that I most of the time I have an immense amount of latitude. You know, people come to me with sort of a vagary and they're like, we're not so concerned with that you execute on it so long as we have something that feels like this. You know, earlier on in my career years ago, I was having people come where it was extremely detailed. Everything was referential. And I was actually just, I was operating more as a technician than an artist. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I was, you know, acting like a lighting tech on set where I'm like, well, I'm not doing anything creative. They have this image. They want it to look exactly like this. So I'm going to use these ratios, these lights, and these positions. These days, I'm fortunate enough to be at a point with things and have built, I guess, trust and rapport with my clients where they're like, Jonny, you're a weirdo. We don't really get what your process is. We don't get how you get there. But so long as you get us there, if you need to dress up like a flamingo and come in and, you know, do whatever you need to do, it's sort of just at my discretion. But it just depends. And obviously for me, I'm really big on visual references. So even if someone does give me that latitude, I'll still do things like test shoots or pull reference images and say, I know you're saying we could go any direction, but let's actually step into that for a second. How does this feel versus this? And it's kind of like when you get the eye exam at the why can't I say that?
Optometrist?
Optometrist?
Optometrist.
Okay, anyway, at the optometrist, I just literally, I'm like, my brain stopped braining there. I was like, I smell toast. I'm having a stroke. Shit. At the optometrist. So it's like when they, which one is clear, A or B, B or C, C or D. So I'll go through that with my clients too and be like, color wise, warm, cool, warm, cool, warm, 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 cool, more warm, more this, more orange, more brown. And so they'll get annoyed at some point, but then they'll get to the end of it. And I say, hey, I know that was a little bit long winded, but there is so much subjectivity in this that I want to make sure that I know what we're going to create is great, but I need it to be great for you and not just great, generally speaking. So I had some pretty bad experiences being freeform, and that, I had to reshoot things, and I would just rather not do that for a plethora of reasons. So even when I do get that latitude, I still try and dial it in as much as possible to make sure that whatever I'm thinking is in alignment. It'd be like if I went to Renee and I'm like, Renee, I want really dark imagery of myself. Like our versions of dark are probably the same, but
I was gonna say we're probably pretty aligned.
yeah, but I mean, but if someone comes to me and they're like, I want moody imagery, and I'm like, I don't think you realize what moody is to Jonny. Like if you were in the confines of that's moody. That photo that's up right there is moody. And that was in my Paolo Reversi phase when I was just light painting everything with a flashlight, which is also a great way to feel like a legitimate artist. I love that technique. Yeah. But yeah, I know that was verbose, but these days I have a lot of levity, and I respect that, and I try and run with it. While at the same time still trying to dig as deep as I can to make sure I know exactly what someone's seeking from me.
I like to tell people that photographers and digital artists were like the waiters and waitresses of pixels. We still at the end of the day have to deliver a visual meal that our client is going to appreciate.
Yeah, it could be the best steak in the world, but if someone doesn't eat red meat, that's sort of
100%.
inconsequential.
Yeah, exactly.
But that also, answers the other question about how when you're approaching that sort of that post process, that gap between the image you've shot and the image you end up with, that's the reason why those two things are probably closer than a lot of photographers is because you've already defined the world that you're going to be creating at the end of it.
Absolutely. And for me, going back to it, it's an efficiency thing. And I will say, even though I do that, I still leave a lot of room for sort of chaos and spontaneity in my things. Personally, it's hard for me sometimes to translate my ideas into words, even though I consider myself to be a good writer and a speaker. A lot of things sort of exist in my mind in an abstraction. So I'll say, hey, we're going to head this general direction. We're going to go in a southeasterly kind of direction, but I can't say where we're going to wind up, but it'll be in that general vicinity. And oftentimes when I do have that levity, even when I have a plan, I'll sort of diverge into something else. Sometimes by accident, I'll just Mr. Magoo my way into a thing. I'll kick one of my lights over and it'll get rid of my background light. And I'm like, ooh, that's glorious, and then I just run with that. Or there's just some experimentation that happens and something inherently just feels more right, whatever right is relative to set, circumstance, vision, all of that.
Well, let's see if we can stumble into something now with another shot in optics, maybe.
Okay, let's give it a go.
Let's do it.
Boop-a-doo, screen share, and share, and Photoshop. All right, are we good to go? We
are good to go.
Thank you for the confirmation. So this is Delana, and this was also a recent personal project that I shot. I'm trying to bring up work that I've done recently just because it speaks to the mood that I'm in at this point in time. Obviously, you can see a little bit of relation to my current set. We have those two backlights. We have the floating backdrop. There's even similar light on the face of Delana as what I have going right now. I operate in phases when it comes to my own personal work. So in this case, this is just where I'm at right now. I'm in a backlight, floating backdrop, punchy light to the face kind of phase. If we do another stream like this 2 or 3 months from now, it'll probably be completely different. I'll be clad in pearls with very soft, glowing light and no shadows to speak of whatsoever. Although that's really never the case. But I just sort of operate that way, and I get bored of a thing, or I realize that I'm getting too comfortable in a thing and it's becoming rote, and then I challenge myself to get out of whatever that box might be that I have placed myself into. But I have already done a little bit of work on this in Capture One, so this is slightly different than the raw file. I just played with contrast, I played with color, I played with a little bit of tonality. I will say I get a question a lot about the color grading in my work. ultimately, in terms of how we traditionally think of color grading, there's not a lot of color grading in my work. Most of what's actually happening has to do with what's happening on set. So, you know, on a scene, I might have a taupe backdrop, and I might have a mid skin tone, melanin wise, and I might have, you know, a cream dress, and then I might warm up my lights to 4800 Kelvin. And so there's already an immense amount of color cohesion or dissonance, if that's what I'm going for, on set, on scene, in camera. And then what I'm doing in post is maybe just adjusting channels a little bit, magnifying something, diminishing something else, but it's already so close to the fact. So I actually get questions like that all the time. People slide into my DMs and they're like, brah, teach me your color grading process. And I'm like, I don't really have any processes to begin with, but especially not that. So there's no linear way for me to teach that. But this is where it's at right now, coming out of Capture One. Nothing else has been done to this at this point. Delana has wonderful skin, so I know I'm not going to have to do anything with that. Obviously, we have the environmental aspect of the background here. We can already see that I did have a filter on my camera for this specific one. I believe it was a black mist, probably a 1/4 black mist.
Love for the black mist once
Black
again.
mist.
Like
Give me
in
one
real
for everyone.
life and
I'm
digital.
I'm going to run away for 1 second. There's the postman's at my door. I will be literally
Okay,
back.
go run. This is what we do Boris Effects Live for, is the live deliveries. And now, yeah, see, this is what I wanted to see, just like how awake Mission Control was, and actually, you know, too awake, I think. I mean, let's while this is happening,
I'm back.
I will.
I'm back.
Oh, okay. This went too quickly. One of those, please.
It
Please.
was
That's all
actually
I'm asking.
a belated birthday present. Okay.
Well, happy belated birthday.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
I know.
Happy belated birthday.
You know, you only turned 21 once, so I'm really excited about this. So wait, did I miss anything as far as what we were talking about or what you want me to cover?
Oh, you missed everything. Yeah. So I
Okay.
think you should
Sorry, my
just crack on as if nothing happened.
Don't
Okay, fair
forget to
enough.
duplicate your layer, Johnny.
Oh, thank you so much. See, this is what I need.
Thank you.
Boom, duplicated.
Do you know, Johnny, that you can convert that into a smart object and you can go back and forth to completely anti all of your commitment issues? Because I have commitment issues and I need to make that a smart object layer, but you like to flatten your layers. So I'm
all
gonna
right.
say
Well,
don't make that.
walk me through how to do this then, Renee. If we want
You're
to,
gonna right click on your background layer, your background
Okay.
copy, yeah, exactly. And then you're gonna say convert to smart object. So right and down,
That was
boom.
way too complicated for me. I'm
I
not
know,
gonna-
it's a lot of extra steps. Old dogs, new tricks. 21-year-old dogs, new tricks. There we
Hey.
go.
I got 21 in dog years is about where I'm at age-wise, so that's actually really impressive.
I realized it after I said it.
It's fine. Okay, so then what this allows me to do is then like go back in and make adjustments to what I've already done, correct?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, cool. So all right, we have this going. Once again, I like everything that's going on here. This is a really great starting point for me. To be completely honest, sometimes I might even just let sleeping dogs lie, so to speak, since we're on the dog metaphors. And I might not do much more to it than this, but let's go ahead and jump into optics once again. There's always that element too, even if I get something extremely close in camera, and then I'm where I want to be in Capture One, I'll usually come into Photoshop anyway and play with something like optics. And these days it's pretty much all optics, just because I'm like, I want that final little push. Like in my mind, I'm like, there's the 2% that's going to take this from like really, really good to absolutely freaking amazing. And I'm always searching for that last little nuance. I really do believe that the devil is in the details, and I'm constantly searching for the devil. Read into that whatever you want.
I was gonna say.
Don't you start. And so you can see people like I have DxO in here, which I really don't use anymore. I have Nick. I had Alien Skin in here before. I had Oniric, which is a glow plugin, and now all of that I have at my fingertips and discretion right through optics. So I love just consolidating that. Also, I need to clean up my filters and get rid of the things that I don't need to speed up my system, but that would be efficient. And everyone realizes at this point that I'm not terribly efficient with that type of stuff. So I'm not going to apply this. This is something that pops up for those of you who haven't used optics. If I were to say yes to this, it would repopulate all of those layers that I had for that last image that we worked on, the black and white. It would have that diffusion layer. It would have that film stock layer. And it would also have the grain layer that we had at those specific opacities. In that case, it was 100% per layer. But this is nice for me. When I'm working with the set, I don't even necessarily have to go into anything that's saved. I just go ahead and click yes, and it punches all of those back up. And especially a lot of times what I'll do is I'll end up working with like 17 layers and something like optics, and everything will be at like 3%. And, you know, I'll toggle it on and off, and someone will be standing by me. They're like, Jonny, I can't see a difference. And I'm like, that's because your eye isn't refined enough. There is a world of difference in that. But a
You are
lot of,
absolutely right. Absolutely right. This is the perfect way of using optics, by the way.
and I love that idea of stacking. And even sometimes, you know, I might get something where there's a little bit of red in it. And I'm like, all right, I don't care for that red. And of course, I could just go directly into the red channel. But then I know I'm like, oh, there's this one film stock that pushes cyan. So instead of dealing with that layer, I'll just create another layer that I know is cyan dense and then put that at a 5% opacity to nullify my you know, red. Just overcomplicating things, which is, you know, probably a metaphor for my life, but whatever. So I'm going to say no. No. All right. So then we're working with this. And once again, I'm just going to do some experimentation type stuff. Right now, looking at this image, I will say as a caveat to this, I'm working off my laptop right now. I never work off of my laptop. I have a proper workstation. Obviously, I have a calibrated monitor. I know that's beyond the scope of what we're doing here, but whenever I speak about editing or retouching, have a device that can actually display the color space that you're working in and have that device properly calibrated. It's really important to know that you're looking at accurate colors. That's one of the reasons I don't work off of this laptop screen specifically. I've tried to calibrate it and it always throws a magenta tint. So in my mind, I'm actually doing a calibration right now where I know this is more green. It looks neutral to me, but if I had this on my traditional workstation monitor, I would probably want to push a little bit more purple into the shadows and into Delena's skin. So I'm going to go ahead and operate from that bit. But calibrate and recalibrate, can't speak to that enough.
Did you know, Jonny, that just because the OLED screens see further into the red channel than a regular IPS screen does?
I actually did not know that at all.
Yeah. So whenever you're doing a color calibration on an OLED screen, it actually is designed to see further into the red channel than other monitors. So yeah, your work is always going to be a little bit more magenta or a little bit more red without calibrating. It's interesting how the technology works.
You just blew my damn mind. I had no idea.
Yeah.
Thank you. I don't know anything. They say that's the beginning of wisdom. I must be getting super wise because I'm realizing every day that I don't know shit about shit. But anyway, no, seriously, I really appreciate you sharing that. All right, so I'm just going to go back to film stocks once again. I know I'm going to be working in color here. Same thing that I sort of did before. I'm just going to allow myself to experiment and just start punching through some of these. I really love a lot of these. I'm not going to lie. And I think it would be different too. I'm just looking for a certain degree of cohesion, and there's nothing specific in my mind. Actually, I kind of like this muted sort of desaturation that's happening here with the Fuji Pro stock emulation. But we're just going to keep moving on for the purposes of exploration. And same thing, like this is something that would happen in the past. I would have just stopped there because I liked it. Now I'm just going to allow myself to pen through all of these, or I guess push, click, press through all of these. I just can't find the right words for things today. This actually is striking to me. Obviously, this is very purple-ish, magenta. I don't know how everyone's seeing this color right now, but it's a lot more purple than it was for certain. I really like the way that this looks, and I know I said I was going to go through everything, but this sort of struck me. It's way too heavy-handed, of course, but since we can change the opacity on this layer at a beck and whim, I'm going to bring this down, and in my mind, I will say I have a weird thing with numbers, everyone. I don't know if anyone else is like this in editing, but I like to do in multiples of 3. So like I'll do something at like 9, 12, 15, 18, 21, 24. If I were to try and put this at 19, I would start getting twitchy. So if you want to know part of my process and you want to edit like Jonny, only do things in 3s. It's extremely important to what it is that I do.
Praise the OCD.
Yeah, it's something like that. Thanks for that.
You're welcome.
Now I'm being diagnosed by the board. Jonny, actually, stay on the. It'll be like Frasier. Stay on the line afterward, and we'll get you a referral to a specialist for your specific neuroses.
See, this is all part of the service.
And I actually almost just spilled my coffee. Everyone, before we got on live, I made a comment to the team, to Ben and Renee. I'm like, I'm going to punch this little glass full of coffee, and I just almost did it. And it almost fired off this table. It was self-fulfilling prophecy, Renee. You're absolutely right. So I love where we're going with this right now. And so we can see the little comparison, the A/B. I also love in optics that there's different ways of evaluating this and putting these side by side. Here on my screen, this is looking very deeply like cyan and a little bit green in the background. Here, this is nullifying that green, and especially her skin tone in this, where we're getting a little bit more purple. This is really resonating with me. I love what's happening in her hair as well. It's going to more of a red auburn. So that at roughly 24% is a great base for me. So I know that that's going to be part of my stack here. I'll go ahead and toggle that back off for a moment. I'm going to add another layer Ta-da! Also, I'm really bad about naming my layers. That's something else Renee can beat me with the hickory stick for. I wind up with like 17 layers, especially in something like Capture One, and I don't know what any of them do. So then I just sort of adjust the opacity to full and like micromanage the image to see what's changing. I'm like, oh, that's actually impacting shadow color. That's where it's at. So
Yeah, you're becoming the Indiana Jones of your own files.
basically, but it makes it exciting, right? It keeps things interesting. That's my excuse for it. Yeah, no, it has nothing to do with bad technique or process or workflow, whatever we're going to call that.
It's
All right,
super relatable.
Okay, so I'm just going to go through, and obviously there's different ways of playing with color in here. Once again, I won't get into the details of this. I'm not the person to speak to the details, but we do have these different ways of dealing with other elements of our actual bit. This obviously is affecting just shadows. So this is different types of flash coloration, and these are just nuanced elements. I'm just playing with this for a second to see what's what. So we can even see what's happening here is now this is nullifying some of that purple. So if we toggle this down and up, it's actually brightening through there. And I like this. I like this little punch. So this is another thing, like I didn't know what I was going to do here. I don't even think that I've ever really spent much time in the flashing sort of module, but I like what's happening to the image here as we put that right around 24% as well. I like that little brightening.
Yeah,
flashing is actually one of my favorites.
Is
it? Oh, sorry, go. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think like because you enjoy the shadows and manipulating shadows.
Yeah.
But flashing is right up your alley.
Oh, this is brilliant. And we can see everyone as I'm toggling this, what's happening specifically in those shadows in the darker parts. We're getting a little bit more detail. And I actually add that it's adding a little bit of punch into her skin. The image feels a little bit more dimensional here to me. So I think in terms of editing, what I'm looking for is I love depth. And obviously there's emotional depth, but I also just love this idea of physical depth. Of course, we're working with a flat medium. So one of the things that I love hearing about my work is someone's like, oh, there's so much pop. There's so much dimensional pop. I feel like I can touch this. And so I just love sort of creating sculpted imagery that feels like it has that third dimension and brings something forward or rearward in the frame. And this is doing that for me categorically. So we're going to leave that in place. So flashing, everyone, this is a new part of my process. I hope you will give it a try as well. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Renee. I'm going to go ahead and add one more layer here because I know I want me some diffusion. Jonny always loves his diffusion because I got to get rid of all of that wonderful detail that I paid so much for with my camera setup. So we're going to go ahead and go back in here. And this, once again, you just have to explore all of these different types of diffusion. They all sort of affect things differently and in different ways. Where was another one that I had liked in here? The silk was really cool, if I recall. So I'm going to go ahead and go into silk and same thing. Obviously, these are just different levels of effect here. And I'm going to zoom in so I can see what I'm doing because I'm blind as a bat.
This is so 1970s glam. Like,
I'm here for it. Yeah. And the funny thing was, everyone.
Yeah.
So this is a prime example of where I created a set. This was a rental. So I rent out my studio on a case-by-case basis. I'm very guarded about my baby in here, especially energetically. Only cool people are allowed. And by cool, I mean weird and artsy. But I rented it out, and this was a project that I was actually acting as a lighting designer for, and the renter, Katie, was kind enough to say, hey, Jonny, I'd love to see how you would photograph this and present this set. So this was something where I was just assisting, and my studio was being used for it, and I got invited in. And then as soon as Delana came out in the styling, I was like, hey, let's go ahead and float this backdrop here and do this and do that. But this isn't something that I probably would have put together myself. It's almost too glammy for me to have created in my own mind. But once I saw it, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so in love with this. So this actually speaks to the power of spending time around fellow creatives and working on collaborative projects. Oftentimes I get to create stuff that I wouldn't have necessarily manifested on my own. And there's something really, really special about that. And especially when you get a group of creatives together like we're doing right now, that's ego and BS free, really wonderful things can emerge from those types of collectives, groups. See, it's the end of every sentence. I can't put the punctuation on it.
Terrible finisher. Got it.
I mean, yeah, we'll just go ahead and add that to my CV. All right, so we're going to play with that. And what's happening? Got some serious subtlety happening here. But we can kind of see that glow that's happening on the nose, how it's blooming out those highlights. It's flattening them a little. I'm going to actually like what's happening there too. So we're going to leave that. And I'm all about subtlety. So I think even when I'm doing something like dodge and burn, like if I would have to toggle something multiple times for most people to see what it is that I'm doing. But if I've changed in a significant way in my editing process over the past couple of years, it is focusing on that subtlety. because for me, like I said, it's that last 1% or that last 1 or 2 degrees that changes everything. Even if you see me modifying my light, it's feathering something literally 2 degrees off of my subject's face in one direction or another, and then I'm like, that's the ticket. Sorry, Renee.
Johnny, your battery died on your camera.
Oh, I said this was going to happen.
No, I don't think it is the camera. I think you've just modified your light to be very dark.
Everyone, with this light is actually illustrating the existential angst that I feel on a daily basis, and so this is the abyss that I find myself in moment to moment, and I deal with it by drinking coffee and bourbon. Those are my 2 go-tos.
There was actually a question. There was a question in the chat about wondering what your birthday present was, and I was actually going to guess bourbon.
I don't think in this case it is, but it might be. I can open this in real time and we can take a look.
I'm going to guess it's a puppy.
They didn't put holes in the box, so it's going to be a puppy skeleton. So unfortunately, sorry, puppy lovers. My bad. I didn't do it. I mean, it's not like I'm saying I did something to the puppy. You in it? No, I don't. No, there's no movement. It's pretty light. It would be a very small puppy. Okay. So I really like where this is all going once again. So we built up these layers. A couple of these are at varying opacities. This top one we're leaving at 100% opacity. If we toggle this to take a look at where we went, that is a monumental difference. And that was just coming to this in a very quick and efficient route. We've changed sort of the highlight. We've changed the dimensionality. We've changed, obviously, the color of the images in the highlights, in the midtones, in the shadows. To me, this feels a little bit more natural. It feels more expressive. It feels more dimensional. And I really love her skin tone here. So one thing that I'm huge on is honoring the skin tone of the individuals that I photograph. Especially those who have a greater degree of melanin. I feel like as an industry, we need to be a lot better about how we deal with skin tones, especially skin tones as they err away from an archetypal fair skin. So I'm hyper fixated on skin tones all the time. And that really drives a lot of my editing process. And even if I'm going to do something creative with skin tones, I always make sure that I'm starting with a base that is neutral or natural. And from there, I start to make adjustments in some sort of creative direction. But that's a whole topic that could take up an entire stream, chat, thing, collaboration. So we won't get mired into those weeds quite yet. But it is a discussion that I think we need to have in mass more frequently. Okay, so this is all working very well for me aesthetically right now. So I could keep playing. Like Ben had asked earlier, that question that comes up, when do you know it's done? If I wasn't on this stream, I might smoke a joint, which is legal here in Colorado. Okay, don't start. But I might smoke a joint and sit here and play with this for 45 minutes and literally just get stuck. And I'm like, oh man, that's cool. What if I do a duotone? I could take it like this, or I'll just desaturate a little, or playing with looks. Let's actually here. We'll pretend like I'll emulate being stoned. I actually don't have a joint, or I would do that in real time, and then everyone could laugh at me. But if we come back here, let's just go down. Let's go to stylize and see what's happening here. Yeah, see, now there we go. See, now if I was a little bit elevated right now, I'd be going through this, and I'm like, whoa, that is like the Matrix, man. There was a glitch that occurred right there. Like that's reality unfurling. So I would get into that type of stuff. Obviously, these all have place and purpose. Like for a lot of the shoots that I've done recently that were a little bit edgier, now that I'm actually looking at these effects, I'm like, holy shit, that could actually work well. So I feel like me being a jackass tends to work in my favor. Because oftentimes I'll discover things through that jackassery that I integrate into my process. So I fully support that for all of you. Allow yourself to play into all of that. These are really rad too. See, I need to, a little Minecraft thing going on. So everyone, this is, you're hearing and seeing me in real time being exploratory. And some of this stuff is really rad. Now, if I didn't give myself a chance to play, I wouldn't even know that this existed. And this is something where for me is a series, I might bring something like this in. Now, this wouldn't be an anchor image for me, but if I played with some of these effects, especially if I stacked and refined these, I could say, hey, as one element of the narrative, here is this, and it would work really well within the context of the story. Just a little side note there. We're going to go ahead and turn you off, friend. Anywho, I'm going to click apply.
Oh, don't click apply. No.
Oh, no. What did I do? What should I have done?
Actually, well, I mean, you haven't done anything bad because you made it a smart object. We can always go back. So if you just double click on optics again. Thank you, Renee, for saving this whole stream.
Uh-oh.
I appreciate that.
I told you all that I was gonna be trouble. Oh, look at this. We're going right back
Are you
in.
There
gonna
you go.
say
And then
yes?
you hit, and then you just hit yes.
Yes. Okay. Okay. I
Okay.
gotcha.
And then
Brilliant.
delete that top layer.
Okay. I don't think I've ever deleted the layer.
Right click on it and then go delete.
Well, that was also too difficult.
There you
Boom.
go.
There we
Okay.
go. Right. So add
Now-
a new layer for me, because I want you
Okay.
to
Of course.
because I know you like your grain.
Yes.
I want you to have a look at ultra grain.
Where do I find
So
ultra
I think
grain?
that's in Film Lab, I believe.
Okay, Film Lab.
And it's right towards
Grain.
the right. It's called S Ultra Grain.
Ah.
So if you do like nerding out with grain, and I know this is terrible for viewers at home because the compression just absolutely
destroying
kills
it.
all good grain. But if you do like nerding out with grain, and you like things just being in the shadows or the midtones or the highlights,
Yeah.
you've got all those controls just over on the side for you, and you can control the individual channel amplitude, the individual channel blurring as well, soften
This is
stuff
wild.
out. I
This
love
is
it.
about to be Johnny's new BFF.
I did not know that this existed, and I am wonderfully bewildered right now.
I stared at different grains and measured different grains for, I'm going to say, about 2 weeks to get a lot of these presets out. So
This is brilliant.
so this is all fun. I'm going to give you one hint.
Yes.
As soon as you find a preset that you like, the
Yes.
first thing you should do is take a look at that bottom parameter called grain seed and just change that to anything else. I don't care what you change it to.
Heavy-handed for
Just
a second.
change it to anything else.
Ah. Now
So now you know that your grain is going to be different than anyone else's grain.
That's fantastic. Well, now I want to do like a screen record of this happening. A little grain gif for myself. No, that's not.
We actually can do cinemagraphs in optics too.
Can you? Okay. This is see.
Not for today. We'll get some.
No.
Not for today, but you can do cinemagraphs as well.
I'm gonna have to look into that. So see, everyone, like I was already a believer in this, and now I'm an evangelist. So you have made a zealot out of me, you two.
Excellent. That's what we like to hear.
Johnny
Also, we all owe Ben like at least one good drink for making the S Ultra grain and for staring at different types of grain for weeks on end, because it is a beautiful filter.
No, this is incredible, everyone.
My brain hurt. It really did at the end of it.
This was years ago. Side note, I do production work in addition to obviously being a photographer and everything else. And one of my friends, Ron Cooper, who's a brilliant photographer, I always like to plug his work. It's very humanist. It's very wonderful. He got this idea to do a project on professional Santa reenactors. So people who literally do it professionally, and there's brotherhoods and unions and all of these things. It's a wild subculture. But anyway, we did this and we traveled around the United States and photographed over 250 professional Santa reenactors. And this was a year-long project that culminated in a gallery showing and a book, and all of the proceeds went to Children's Hospital. And it was this really, really wonderful project. However, by the end of this, both of us were seeing Santa in our sleep. So we stared at this for so long. I had this recurring dream of these like Santas standing at the head of my bed, looking over at me, judging me. And it took me a good month to lose that and a couple of sessions with my therapist. So yeah, if you stare at something long enough, things get weird. So if you're still saying things grainily, I would absolutely believe that, Ben. Okay, yeah, I'm
definitely using the word grainily from now on.
I'm just adding so many things to Urban Dictionary right now. Like I'm making up my own dialect. We're gonna call this the Johnny Denver dialect, John Denver's dialect. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead. Once again, everyone, I want to explore this more, but I could spend the rest of our time literally going through this. This is brilliant. I did not know that this existed at all. And having the ability to do this, and we were going to get into masking, and obviously masking has a ton of uses. But for me personally, having this ultra grain at my fingertips and not having to go into masks and luminosity masks, but being able to do this natively from the tool itself, this is something I'll use and something I'll integrate and play with a lot more. So I'll even create a secondary video, and if it's of merit, they can share that with me just playing with this and do like a time lapse of my freaking out over this. But this is fantastic.
Fantastic.
So
good.
For the time being, we're just going to leave this. I love that. those little experiments. And I'm going to click apply. I did it right this time. But even if I didn't do it, everyone, if you didn't know, you can use smart objects and optics, and that allows you to actually go back in and make changes to what it is you have done. Not everyone knows that. So
We're converting you slowly, Jonny. We'll get you there.
I'm telling you, seriously, soon enough, I'm gonna be respectable finally. So now if we toggle on and off what we did, that is a massive change. That is a massive change for the better. To me, I love the color harmonies better here. I love the punchiness. I love the dimensionality. I love the texture. If we zoom in here for a second and take a peek at what's happening a little bit closer, depending on what device you're looking at this on. And that was so, for me, simplistic. I was able to use all of the tools that were disparate for me before. I might have used 3 different plugins. And then if I wanted to replicate this, I had to go in and use the same parameters on plugin 1, the same parameters on plugin 2. And also, I don't know if any of you have seen this, but the render for this, the time that it actually takes me to get from optics back to Photoshop is in a snap. And I'm running like a very old Silicon, the original M1 processor. So it's not like my system is spec'd out. The other tools that I was using, if you can't tell, I'm a very impatient person, and it might take 30 seconds to get back into Photoshop, and I would have tantrums. No lie. Like, I would be watching the wheels spin, and I'm like, are you serious? Are you serious? We have satellites. We're going to Mars, and it's taking 30 seconds for this to, and I'm just freaking out. Yeah, and having to do anger management techniques and everything. But the speed of this for me really, really impresses me. And I love this. And you know what I'm going to do, everyone, is a classic Jonny move. I'm going to go ahead and
yeah, I knew it. I knew it. It just hurt me a little bit, but well done. Well done.
It's saved. And that is,
oh my God.
That is, boom. It's not.
You know what you can't do now, though, Jonny? Jonny.
I saved what?
What you can't do is a series now. If you have a series of these images, whereas if the smart object layer was still there, if you went Control Z, you could go back into optics, save the setup, and then you could apply it to all the other images.
Well, can I just, when I open the next image in optics, click yes when it asks me if I want to use the previous settings?
Assuming you don't repeat the computer,
all right.
yes.
See, but that's how I live on the edge. I won't alter any of the parameters. I'll just go through. So once again, when I said I hack my way through everything, everyone, I meant that to the truest degree. That wasn't being self-deprecating. But eventually what'll happen is, like you were saying, I'll be like, actually, I want to change a layer, and I'll delete something, and I'll come back and I'll go, oh shit, what was that 17th layer? And then I'll sit there and I'll futz with it. I'm like, wait, I think it was the dual color tone that was sunset at 23%. And then all of my efficiency is gone, because I'll hyperfixate on that until 3 o'clock in the morning. But yes, that would have been the smart way to do it, is to actually do what Renee just said and have saved my recipe, as it were, and put it away instead of just assuming that it's going to stay as is. So much better workflow. Do as Renee says, do not do as I do, everyone. This is just my use case scenario, as it were.
100% agree.
I love that, and I really love how quickly this allowed me to get to this point. And as all of you saw, I had a general idea in mind. I talked a little bit about purples, but as soon as I saw that, I knew it was right. I dialed that down to that roughly 24% for the opacity. We played with a little bit of diffusion. We played with that amazing ultra grain tool, and now this is replicable. So for the other 20 images that I'm going to wind up editing from this set, I can do what I need to do in Capture One, open up into Photoshop, go directly into optics, pop that layer on top, and that is such an efficient way to get to where I want to be. And I was able to do this not only in a timely fashion, but in a fashion where I was seeing a ton of different options for different ways that I could go with this edit, my processing, in real time, one after another. So given my ADHD, given my impatience and my impertinence, given my lack of proper workflow, this is a goddess sent for me. So that is what's happening there. I will stop sharing for a moment. And Ben,
don't stop sharing. Just Brian will cut back to me.
Okay.
Because I've got to give away some stuff.
Yeah, let's give away.
Because I've just seen what the time is, and I know we've not got that long left, so I'm going to give away some stuff.
How has the time gone by so fast?
I don't know. It's just absolutely ridiculous how quickly this has gone, and I don't like it, and I want another hour.
Me too.
But maybe we'll have to do it another time.
We'll have to bring him back for another one.
Jonny V2.
It's a shame. It's a shame.
Jonny Final version 2.
Finn. Underscore Finn.
Jonny Finn.
Yes, if you've enjoyed this as much as I have so far, hit that thumbs up button. If you want to see Jonny back again, obviously hit subscribe, because that's the only way we can track this. So if you have been watching from earlier, you've probably gone to borisfxlive.com and entered our competition to be in part of the big optics giveaway. If you haven't, there's still a fraction of time for you to go in and go to borisfxlive.com and scroll to the bottom of the page and enter all your details in there, because we are giving away 2 more 1-year subscriptions to optics and 1-year subscription to the Boris FX suite, which is everything that we make. So I'm going to ask for the magic tombola to start spinning again for the first, or actually the second, of our optics subscriptions of the day. And as soon as I hear the tombola going, I decide, yep, that's it, the button's been pushed, we're spinning. And congratulations to winner number 2, Dale Fletcher, or Dale Fletcher. Congratulations to you. You are our second winner of optics, joining Suzanne or Susanna. We're never quite sure. And let's don't put the machine away too quickly, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to press that button one more time and I'm going to get another name out. So if people don't know what a tombola is, just Google tombola and you'll know exactly the setup that I have in my lair. It's electrified, of course. We use electricity here, but it is a big box. Enough of the vamping. We have our third winner of optics going in. The magic
Then
tombola
electrified
has
pot.
been pressed. It is Sarah Odze, or Sarah Odze. Congratulations to you, Sarah, and to all of our winners so far for that 1-year subscription of optics. We will be in touch within the next 24 hours, though it's probably 23 hours now because we've been going on about an hour since our first competition. But yes, we have 1 more to give away. Should we do it now?
Let's do it now. I think we should do
Let's
it
do
now.
it now.
My dopamine is skyrocketing
now.
right now. Let's run
Come
with
on,
it.
let's do it. Okay. See, now this is what I do when I throw people into a loop. I say I promise the moon, and what ends up happening is that mission control is just seeing what's going to happen when that third oxygen tank blows out. All right, here we go. And our winner of Boris Effect Suite is going to Mariana Noguera. Mariana Noguera. Congratulations, or Mariana, of course. Of course. I think it might be Mariana. My English accent wants to elongate every single A in a word that I see. Sorry, Mariana, or Mariana, to you. But as recompense for that, you're going to be sauntering, sashaying away with a 1-year subscription of the Boris Effect Suite. So congratulations to you and all of our winners. Yes, well done, well done. We did have a crowd at some point to applaud that, but we don't have the technology anymore. That technology got taken over by bees, apparently. I wish I was kidding. Right, we're not going to do bee talk this stream. I've done bee talk the last 3 streams, and people are getting very angry at me. Not as angry as the bees, by the way.
I had to say it.
I
know it's terrible.
People are being angry about it.
Yes, it's usually the waspy people. That's yes. There we
Beauty
go.
and the Beast.
All right. Okay. Well, let's. Thank you. I'm literally looking up at that hive at the moment.
I want honey now. Like, does anyone else have like a Pooh Bear inkling for honey now? No one. It's just me.
I think maybe a little bit,
Perfect.
but let's
bother.
not. Yeah. Let's finish up a few little bits here, because this has actually been a real joy. It's not surprisingly. I know my voice there was a little bit more surprised than I expected it to be.
Shockingly,
Shockingly, it's been a joy. Yeah, Renee, last thing. How long have people got to enter their shots in optic shots into sinister shots?
We have until Halloween, so October 31st. 30 days past September, April, June, and yeah, 31st.
Yeah, so we're keeping Halloween the same day this year, yeah? Is that what we're doing?
Yeah, yeah, as far as I know. I mean, I'm okay with
Okay.
Halloween lasting the whole month, which is why we have the contest going on. But yeah, basically we have until the 31st to get your images in. The first, well, sorry, the second last giveaway is this Friday. So, or sorry, giveaway contest is this Friday. And then we announce the final winners on Halloween night. So Halloween day. So hustle, hustle, get your stuff in.
It's scary. We do have some very, very spooky shots, and your shot could be in the annals of spookiness. So this is an official annal that we have at Boris Effects. So yes, very, very short amount of time. Jonny,
Yes.
where can people find out more about you if
Um,
if uh, if they wish?
you could look at the local Denver crime blotter. That's the first place. But no,
There you go.
outside of that,
Perfect.
They have to report
outside,
everything there, yeah.
outside of peoplefinder.com, no, you can you can go to my website,
Oh,
which is JonnyEdward.com. That's JONNY, no H, EDWARD, no S. I basically have two first names. I know it's super creative. You can also find me on Instagram at Johnny Creative. That's no H in Johnny and then creative. Feel free to reach out to me anytime, anyone. I'm a nerd and I really don't have a life outside of art and what it is that I do. So it's never a bother if you want to talk lighting, life, philosophy, or if you want to, dox me and tell me that I don't know what I'm doing with retouching. I'm here for all of it. So I'm a take on all comers type of person. In one respect of my life, at least. But yeah, those are the two main places to find me. I'm on X as well, is Sir Johnny Edward, but that place has devolved a bit, so I'm rarely on there. Threads and all of those things too. But the two primary ways are through my website and through Instagram. So yeah, reach out anytime, everyone.
Highly, highly recommend people to go over and just see some of your work. Like you'll get lost. You'll get lost in it. I can't praise it enough. Well, I
Thank you.
could, but I'm not going to.
Don't swell my ego, all right?
Okay,
I have
I'm
things to
gonna
do
pull it
after
back.
this. I'll just be shoving old ladies out of the way. I'm like, do you know who I am? Ben knows. I'm the Johnny Edward. Get your ass out of the way.
Oh, it's no H, no H.
No H.
You've got to
Right.
say that. You've got to say
Yeah,
that. It's Johnny
you,
No
you do.
H.
Exactly. Well, because
Yeah.
what happens is everyone will add the H and then add an S to Edward for Edwards to make it plural. So then they're like, I can't find you. And I'm like, well, it's the wrong spelling because I just chose to be difficult in this life. My actual legal last name, I had to change my last name when I was younger for reasons because my family was into some nefarious stuff. But I'm half Sicilian and my born name is Abrascato. So my actual born name is Johnny Abrascato, which is so much cooler. Like it carries so much. I feel like a good fella, Maybe I'll have to change back at some point.
Good luck. Good luck getting anybody to spell that properly for you.
I'm like, it's just avocado with a B and an R, and no, it's fine.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
I definitely would have been called Johnny Avocado as a kid, and there were already enough problems. So I don't need that shit.
Yeah, as someone who also changed their name a bit later in life, having not to explain or not to explain how to spell your name to every single person you meet is such a godsend.
It's nice.
I would recommend it to everyone.
Well, and when I'm feeling particularly austere, I can just be like, hello, I'm John Edward. Hi, John Edward here. John Edward coming to you from the heartland in Denver, Colorado. That type of thing.
And on that note, I want to say thank you very much to our guest, John Edward from the Heartland, and
This is
Renee
CNN.
Robin from beyond the Great North Wall. It's been an absolute pleasure to have both of you in this thing that we still aren't putting a label on this. Which I'm very, very happy
it's
for.
been a lovely thing. Whatever it is we
That's
have, I will treasure it
The
all.
herding of
has.
digital cats.
Yeah.
Exactly.
The Digital Cats. Hey, I feel like we could start a punk band with that name, the three of us, the Digital Cats.
I'm into it. I can't sing. Perfect.
I'm into it as well.
I can scream. I can't sing well. I could croon. I can croon or I can scream. So it could be like a Sinatra-esque thing or like a deathcore thing. I just vacillate back and forth between those.
I mean,
So
deathcore could work because I could just like turn on, you know, like some type of electric device onto the guitar and just like,
yeah,
and it would just be like horrible sounds. No
perfect.
offense to the deathcore peeps, but like, wow.
I think before we get into any more trouble, because I'm going to say about 70% of our audience are deathcore peeps.
Uh-oh.
I'm going to say goodbye to both of you. Get
I'm
off
a
the
deathcore
screen
peep,
because I don't
everyone.
want
We're
you
here.
anymore. Yeah, exactly. Thank you. Yeah, and again, I want to say thank you to our guests. I want to say thank you to all of you for watching. If you've enjoyed what you like, please leave a comment down below. If you want to see Jonny come back, obviously, please leave a comment down below. I will be typing as soon as I finish this stream. So thank you to everyone from me, Ben Brownlee, and to all of us from Boris Effects. I'll see you again soon. Bye for now.